Hello and welcome to edition 5 of Miguel Delaney's Inside Football. This is a video cast that is a complement to my newsletter and general work for The Independent, in which I discuss the wider themes of the game and explore what the headlines really mean. So please like, subscribe and leave comments, especially if you want to hear more. And today you'll be hearing a bit about, I suppose, one of the biggest stories in football. What is always one of the biggest stories in football, and what feels a particularly recurring theme right now, which is yet more difficulties with Manchester United and a manager. And now, as the pressure builds again on Ruben Amorim, it feels like there's a bit of a constant back and forth at the moment with what I thought was actually quite a good performance against Chelsea was followed by one of Amorim's worst with that 3-1 defeat at Brentford, which I attended. Now, as regards actually, I suppose, what is factually the latest, there is obviously going to be no movement before the Sunderland game. Now, while the manner of that match might dictate what happens next, I don't think there'll be movement after that match and into the international break, despite the international break being such a natural moment for clubs to change manager. I think that's for a few reasons. Principally, of course, because the club have backed Amorim so much and they've got a lot invested in this. Also because of a constant message that's been repeated in the club, which is that this is a 3 to 4 window thing. So I have reported and have been told by a few sources that naturally a figure like Sir Jim Ratcliffe has been getting agitated. This isn't going as well as he wanted to by now. He spoke to the hierarchy in the summer, and something that has been reiterated to him and has very much been the message from Chief Executive Omar Barada and underneath him Jason Wilcox is that this is a 3 to 4 window project. But of course, projects, the great complication for them is when there's no sign of progress. And I think we can definitively say that is the case with Amorim's Manchester United. It's almost a year into it now, and it shouldn't really be possible that United are staying on track for what is just over 1 point per game. Again, people's relegation form, it's remarkable. It's kind of a reverse alchemy in some ways, turning silver or all of United's money into base metal of some bad performances. But I have to say, I'm quite torn as regards my own personal opinion on what they should do and on Amorim himself. And that is, of course, because they're dealing with a situation that has so many factors playing on it, so many external forces. Which means it's very hard to actually come to any sort of clean conclusion on this, despite the clarity of those results. I mean, because on one level, again, I went to that Brentford game, and I was sitting there after the match at Amorim's press conference, and I've obviously done a few of these now, and I've done a lot where Amorim is in, he's having to explain yet another bad performance. And the thing about it is, I find he actually speaks, despite the fact you can see him wrestling with all this and struggling with it, he speaks with a lot of clarity and conviction. I think, weirdly, despite results again, I think he's actually got the charisma and personality for the job. And by that I mean, I think he is someone, unlike 99% of football coaches, who can weather the immense pressure of being a Manchester United manager. I think you can see it in the way he speaks after the game, the way he explains himself, the way he talks about things, the way he won't be given to certain kind of debates around the team. But of course, the irony is that it's that very ability to weather the storm Manchester United that means, or plays a part in why he's not addressing some of the biggest issues, which is of course about this system, this formation. And this is where, from speaking to people in football, there has been like more direct, I would say, knowledgeable criticism from Amorim. And I had someone from another club point out to me now. At one point, he was after the Manchester City defeat, the one at at City's ground 2 weeks ago, that he was talking about how he absolutely won't change his philosophy. Not even the Pope could convince him. And I had someone from another club say to me that a formation isn't a philosophy, which is almost the first issue here. A formation is actually just a vehicle for philosophy. So Barca, people would say, that ideologically their formation is 4-3-3, but it's not. The 4-3-3 is just the vehicles that they play their passing possession game, and that formation can evolve as the game evolves. So I think it's quite a bizarre thing to stick to. Now, obviously, one of the main issues in this team is midfield. It was something that so stood out in the Brentford game. Manchester United now, I think at this point, because of their summer business, they've got about 6 players who can play as a number 10 or in those 2 positions that Amorim likes behind the forward. Now that means they have to crowbar in Bruno Fernandes into the central midfield. And after the game, Amorim repeatedly went on about how they played Brentford's game and they didn't have control. He mentioned the word control 7 times. Now, how do you get control in football? It's true central midfield. It's true having a controlling midfielder who can pass the ball, who can, set the tempo of a game. But what was so notable in that match was the amount of time as Bruno Fernandes, even though he's in that position, he kept playing game-breaking balls. People would call them Hollywood balls. It happened so often, and that just immediately undermines what Amorim wants in the situation. And this isn't to criticise Fernandes, who I think has been one of the few Manchester United players you could say has properly stood up in all this and taken responsibility. It's just he's been crowbarred into a role that doesn't suit him. Now, Amorim, and I suppose people who defend him would reasonably say that this will all get better once he has that midfield he wants. And we know they want to believe in the summer. He would prefer a midfielder who can drive the ball up the pitch, to carry the ball forward in that way and be alongside some sort of controller. But then you sort of back round to the kind of... And I think this reflects how so much of this debate and discussion is so circular and why United keep coming back round to the same issues. I think they're constantly chasing themselves. They're constantly chasing their own decisions because they're always responsive and reactive rather than ahead of time. If a coach needs to spend $500 million to get the team he wants, what was the point in appointing that manager? I know that's quite harsh, but these are the realities the club have to deal with, especially in a PSR world. And I return to a point I've written in my pieces that has been made elsewhere, that Liverpool really, really liked Ruben Amorim, but they felt they would have to do huge work on their squad to fit exactly what he wanted. And it comes round again to the fact that the problem here isn't really Amorim, although obviously he is a problem right now. He's not adapting. He's not doing the basics of coaching, really, I suppose you can almost say. The team isn't improving despite him having more work with them. As regards how bad last season was, I remember being told that he tried to impose a similar training schedule, especially as regards intensity, at Manchester United early on, in the same way he did at Sporting. This despite the fact that he's playing much less forgiving fixtures. Ultimately, a calendar for Sporting isn't the same in a Portuguese league where they have so many advantages, isn't the same as a calendar for Manchester United. And that also in, of course, a campaign where they're in the Europa League season, so it matches every 3 days. So that set him back first. But then secondly, now that he's finally got this time, it seems like there's some obvious things that he's not responding to, that he's not dealing with. All this talk of a midfielder and how Kobbie Mainoo doesn't fit, well, why not coach Kobbie Mainoo to be closer to the sort of midfielder you want? This is a staple. We shouldn't get too far away from this. This is a staple of good managers in that way. They can remold players. And I continuously come back to the Antonio Conte example, a manager that Manchester United have toyed with over the years, that has always there's been a resistance to him in England. And that's fair enough, I think, because of the way maybe things always evolve with Conte at clubs. But his initial seasons are really, I would say, among the greatest examples of coaching in modern football. And I point to his best season at Chelsea and the way he ensured Chelsea were the last club outside Liverpool or Manchester City to win the league. In 16-17, Chelsea had a lot of issues. A bit like Amorim, Conte initially attempted to put in his own preferred formation, his own preferred ideology, but after 3 games realised he didn't have the players. So what did he do? He basically he went away, thought about this a lot, and came up with a formation that fit what Manchester United had. And then he also coached players like Victor Moses to be different than what they were. And this is exactly the point I'm talking about with Manchester United. But of course, some of this comes back, and again, this is how it's so circular. It comes back to why Amorim isn't the real problem here. And of course, I know if some Manchester United fans watching this are going to be screaming at me saying the real problem is the Glazers. And yes, that's true. It's something, again, I've written in The Independent. It's one of the great modern tragedies of football that a club like Manchester United, an institution like that, were allowed to be bought with a leveraged buyout 20 years ago now, 20 years and a half ago. It should never have happened. It's something that actually the rules have ensured, and it's more difficult for that sort of buyout to happen now. And you can get into all bigger debates about, the type of ownerships of football that we will get into in other videos. But in this case, obviously Manchester United, since Ferguson left, they're initially chasing the response to the massive transition that such a huge figure leaving represents. But I think what is so galling about United over the last half decade, and particularly over the last 2 years since Ratcliffe and the Ineos hierarchy have come in, because they obviously specifically wanted to change everything. They initially made big moves in the first 3 months, and that was partly psychological, actually. They wanted to essentially ruffle feathers at the club to show, to signal this was going to be a big change. So they're essentially starting from scratch again. Now, despite that opportunity, I don't think they did what would be considered best practice by pretty much anyone who knows what they're talking about in football. And I think that's all the more amazing given that Ratcliffe himself has spoken in interviews about how United missed a data revolution at clubs like Brentford, Brighton, Liverpool and Manchester City, that they had to catch up with that. So he evidently knows some of what needs to be done here. And what needs to be done, what anyone in football would say is, the way you build a modern club, regardless of the level, is, first of all, the football leadership decide on what sort of club you want to be. Now, by that I mean, obviously you have to consider your size, your outlook, but for Manchester United, that's limitless, really. I mean, their revenue is still among the biggest in the game, despite all their troubles. They have so many advantages in that regard, especially in the way football is structured with PSO and financial regulations. So they can be anything they want to be, really. They don't have to cut their cloth to match in that way, unlike, say, a Brighton. But from that then, so yeah, United can see themselves as a club that's obviously going to be regularly challenging. That's what they are. Although they obviously need to get back to that level. But within that, what anyone would say is that you then decide you need to set the football ideology of the club, essentially the way you play. And the most obvious examples of this are Ajax and Barcelona. They have long had this ideology running to the team. Now, that doesn't mean everyone has to copy exactly their style, although that's what clubs like Manchester City have done. It means you set on some ideology, and I think it's preferable and much more beneficial if that football ideology is linked to your history, your culture, because it encourages buy-in, and I think it makes the ideology work to a deeper level. It's a lot easier for everyone from the club to get behind. It's a lot easier for the fans to get behind. And again, an obvious example of that, I suppose, is when a club starts to play, or a team starts to play a type of football that just isn't liked at that club, be it slow passing or whatever. And I suppose at United there's an element of, they like kind of intense wing play, obviously bringing through academy players, and a speed of play as well. That creates kind of like, when I suppose I think of Manchester United in that sense, what I most associate is these sieges under Alex Ferguson, where they would just absolutely bombard a team and gradually raise the tempo until the opposition couldn't withstand that anymore. Instead of doing that, though, which I feel they should have done, and from what I'm told, Dan Ashworth, who rather abruptly left, he had a technical plan, because what Ashworth is really good at above anything in football is coming up with technical plans that federations or clubs can follow. Essentially a roadmap and a structure that's in place, so you have all this. And so yes, what you do is you decide on ideology, and then you make all recruitment decisions, be it the coach or the players, that all fit into that. And that means you're never as anchored to one individual manager. It means that if a coach leaves, or even if you want to tweak your style, the players fit into that. But Man United didn't do that. They instead almost kind of recreated a problem from 10 years ago, which was basically, centering everything around one coach. And that's not just one coach with a specific, one coach who plays a way of football. It's a coach with a very, very specific interpretation of a way of football. So your background to this problem of everything having to be anchored to Amorim. Now, to be fair, I gather that some recruitment decisions in the summer were made kind of independent of Amorim. That that some signings were about the future of the team in that sense. The players that they can invest in. Because obviously that's been a problem at United for a decade now. They've had so many players that kind of fit certain styles, and every single coach is adapting to that, and what is essentially a hodgepodge of a squad. But yeah, for now you've essentially got a manager who I actually think can be a success at Manchester United, but it's not Manchester United right now. He feels like he'll be exactly the right coach for when they're closer to where they want to get to. Because right now they've got too much work to do, and he has too specific an interpretation of the job. Now, what that might mean is, that doesn't necessarily mean you get rid of him, I suppose. And this is why I say I'm kind of conflicted about it. This means that they have to show a lot of patience. And we come back around to this question of spending $500 million to make it happen. And can a club like Manchester United really show that patience? Because, we can already see it with Amorim. Even fans who have backed him, there's an element of losing patience. You can feel the noise growing. It's a bit like the whole kind of Mike Tyson line about everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. Well, everyone's got a football project until you keep losing games and there's no progress, and you're getting beaten 3-1 by Brentford, almost a literal punch in the face. In terms of in terms of how Brentford physically bombarded Manchester United in that game, and they couldn't cope with it. But I think Brentford were much smarter than that. They used Manchester United's weaknesses against them. It was really clever, canny, pragmatic management within a structure that Amorim actually hasn't been capable of yet. Keith Andrews completely schooled him in that regard. So yeah, and so I have all these conflicting views about the Amorim situation, and that it warrants an element of patience, but is this too much? I think he can be right for Manchester United, but not right now. He is a problem right now, but ultimately Manchester United have much bigger problems. And round, and this is the modern Manchester United in a cycle that, despite major changes at the top of the club, they can't seem to escape from. This has been the situation for months now. Let's see if it's going to continue to be the situation for the next few months, because while everyone is saying Sunderland won't alter too much, again, as is the case in football, results and performances have a habit of putting events beyond your control. But anyway, thank you. Please like, subscribe, comment, all of that, and see you for the next one soon. Thank you.